Next ball game, little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Ohio State at Penn State, 12 o'clock Saturday. Ohio State's minus 15, total 62. Now the Buckeyes are scoring 50 points a game, and they're gaining over 515 total yards per contest. Quarterback C.J. Stroud's also leading the nation with 28 touchdown passes. And if you're concerned about this big number on the road, just keep in mind, Ohio State covered in their last 5 straight. So these guys are no strangers to covering large numbers, covering double digits. That's just what they do. Now they're facing a Penn State team who failed to cover in 3 out of their last 4 themselves. They're also 77th in the country in pass defense. Might have their hands full with C.J. Stroud and the boys. Now total-wise, Penn State saw 5 out of their last 7 get over the number. Meanwhile, Ohio State's last 5 straight all got over the line as well. I'm going to lean toward the Buckeyes, minus 15, over 62. Next matchup, it is going to be TCU at West Virginia, 12 o'clock East. TCU's minus 7 on the road, total 69 and a hook. Now, the undefeated Horned Frogs are scoring 45 points a game. And they rank in the top 3 in the nation in total yards. Max Duggan's also 8th in the country in touchdown passes. He's thrown only 1 pick all year. Now they're facing a West Virginia team who lost 2 out of their last 3, and they've really struggled on defense lately. They've allowed 42 points a game in their last 3 outings. They also have one of the worst pass defenses in the game. They're 117th in the country in stopping the aerial attack. Now total-wise, 4 out of West Virginia's last 7 did get over the line. Meanwhile, TCU went 5-1 of the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward TCU minus 7 over 69.5. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Notre Dame at Syracuse, and that'll be a 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Syracuse is minus 3, totals 46. And not only does Syracuse have one of the toughest defenses in the ACC, they've also done a solid job against the number here this year. They're 6-1 against the spread in their last 7. Michael Jones has 52 tackles and 3 sacks. Syracuse is also holding their opponents to just 171 yards a game passing. Now they're facing a Notre Dame squad who failed to cover in 4 out of their last 6. They have a tough time throwing the football themselves. They're actually 101st in passing yards per contest. When it comes to the number, I got to imagine this is going to be an incredibly physical football game. Notre Dame's 5-2 to the under in their last 7. Meanwhile, Syracuse saw their last 4 straight stay under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Syracuse minus 3, under 46. Next matchup, little SEC action. I'm talking about Arkansas at Auburn. That'll be a 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Arkansas is minus 3.5 on the road, total 61. Now, in my opinion here, I think the Razorbacks should be able to run all over these guys. They have a top 10 rushing attack, and Auburn on the other side is 119th in rush defense. Now, Raheem Sanders, he's gaining well over 100 yards a game on the ground, and he has 7 touchdowns. Meanwhile, quarterback K.J. Jefferson, he's thrown only 1 interception all season long. They're facing an Auburn club who lost their last 3 straight. They covered the number only 2 times this year. Now, their offense has also struggled significantly. They're 108th in the country in scoring. Now, total-wise, the Tigers saw their last 2 straight get over the number. Meanwhile, Arkansas is 6-1 of the over themselves. I'm going to lean toward Arkansas minus 3.5, over 61. Next contest, it is going to be Oklahoma at Iowa State, 12 o'clock East. Oklahoma is the 1-point favorite on the road, totals 55. And as rough as the Sooners have looked over the past month or so, it's actually the Iowa State Cyclones who lost their last 4 straight. They're averaging only 16 points a game during that span. Now they're facing an Oklahoma team who's in the top 25 in total yards per game. They're actually coming fresh off a 52-point effort against Kansas. When it comes to the number, oddly enough, 4 out of the Sooners' last 7 did stay under the number. Meanwhile, Iowa State's 3-0 to the under in their last 3 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Oklahoma minus 1, under 55. Next ball game, it is going to be Boston College at UConn, and that'll be a 12 o'clock Eastern start time. I'm looking for it on our big screen behind me. I don't think it's up there. And, oh, there it is. Anyway, Boston College, UConn, 12 o'clock East. BC's minus 8.5 on the road, totals 45. As bad as UConn's been over the past few years, it's actually Boston College who's one of the worst covering teams in college football. They're just 1-6 against the spread in their last 7. They're also second to last in the country in rushing yards. They're gaining only 68 yards a game on the ground, literally no threat to run the football. They're facing a UConn team on the other side who covered the spread in their last 4 straight. I know we're not talking about a great football team, but the only thing that matters is covering the number. And they've done it in their last 4 straight games. And I'll tell you this much, they do have a fairly solid running game. They can move the ball on the ground. These guys are gaining over 185 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to scoring, I'm not expecting an offensive explosion here on Saturday. The Huskies saw their last 3 straight stay under the total. No real shocker there. Meanwhile, Boston College went 4-3 to the under in their last 7. I'm going to lean toward UConn plus 8.5, keeping this one close, under 45. Next matchup I have for you, little ACC action. I'm talking about Georgia Tech at Florida State, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. FSU's the 22-point favorite, totals 48.5. Now, I'll tell you what, Florida State's done a real nice job running the football. They're averaging nearly 6 yards a carry. They rank in the top 25 in rushing yards. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side, the Noles are limiting their competition to just 175 yards passing. Jamie Robinson's leading the D with 51 tackles on this season. The Seminoles are squaring off against a Georgia Tech team who has a horrible time generating any offense. These guys are scoring just 16 points a game, and they rank 117th in total yards. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, the Yellow Jackets actually have one of the worst rush defenses in the ACC. When it comes to total, Georgia Tech's 6-1 to the under this year. Meanwhile, Florida State saw 2 out of their last 3 fall under the total. I'm going to lean toward Florida State minus 22, and the under 48.5 in that tight window. Next matchup, USF taking on Houston, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Houston's minus 17, total 62. And even though Houston definitely should be favored in this one, which they are, this is a mighty big number for a team allowing 32 points a game. These guys having a tough time on defense. This Cougar D is also 93rd in the country in total yards allowed. They're facing a USF team who covered this year against the likes of Cincy and Florida. They're also doing a nice job of running the football. These guys are averaging just about 5 yards a carry. Now, when it comes to the total, USF saw 5 out of their last 7 get over the line. Meanwhile, Houston's 6-1 at the over in their last 7 themselves. I'm going to lean toward USF plus 17, keeping this one close, over 62. Next ball game, little maction here for you. I'm talking about Toledo at Eastern Michigan, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Toledo's the 7-point favorite on the road, totals 58. Now, the Toledo Rockets, they got the W in 3 out of their last 4. Victories over the likes of Kent State, Northern Illinois, and Central Michigan. Now, this Rocket offense is averaging 37 points a game. I know not a lot of people talk about the MAC, but these guys certainly lighting up the scoreboard. Quarterback DeQuad Finn and running back Jaquez Stewart, they've combined for nearly 1,000 yards rushing on the ground together. They're facing an Eastern Michigan team who's 94th in the country in stopping the run. They're also giving up 31 points a game. When it comes to total, Eastern Michigan saw overs versus the likes of Western Michigan and Buffalo. Meanwhile, Toledo saw their last 3 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Toledo minus 7 over 58. Next matchup, Miami, Ohio taking on Akron, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Miami, Ohio's minus 9, totals 49. And even though they've struggled on offense, this Red Hawk defense really does a nice job keeping these guys in ball games. They've got themselves a top 20 rush defense. And they're led by Ryan McWood, who has 71 tackles on the year. Now, he's going to have to slow down an Akron team who lost their last 7 straight, and they have an incredibly tough time running the football. Not only are these guys averaging only 19 points a game, they're also in the bottom 3 in college football in rushing yards per contest. Now, total-wise, the Zips saw their last 2 straight stay under the number. Meanwhile, Miami, Ohio went 5-0 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Miami, Ohio, -9, under 49. Next ball game, the real Miami. I'm talking about the Miami Hurricanes at Virginia. Not on our big screen behind me, but that's going to be a 12:30 Eastern start time. The Miami Hurricanes are -2.5, totals 47. And even though the Canes have hit a bit of a rough patch, it ain't for a lack of offensive production. These guys are in the top 15 in passing yards, and they also have a very tough rush defense on the other side of the ball. Corey Flagg and James Williams, they've combined for nearly 70 tackles between the two of them. They're facing a Virginia team who lost 3 out of their last 4. They covered the point spread only twice this year. And the Cavaliers' biggest problem this season is their inability to punch it into the end zone. The Cavs are averaging only 17 points a game, which is actually in the bottom 10 in all Division I, the FCS. Now, total-wise, Virginia's 6-1 to the under this season. Meanwhile, Miami saw 4 out of their last 6 stay under the line. I'm going to lean toward the Miami Hurricanes -2.5, under 47. Next ball game, it is going to be Charlotte at Rice, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. The Rice Owls are -16.5, totals 59. And despite this fairly big number, Rice has done a real nice job covering the point spread this year. They're 5-1 against the spread in their last 6. And they have a top 30 pass defense. Chris Conte and Myron Morrison, they've combined for 85 tackles together. They're facing a 1-win Charlotte team who's gone just 2-5 against the spread on the year. And most or all of that failure is because of their defense. They're allowing more points per game than any other team in the nation. Now, when it comes to the total, the 49ers saw 5 out of their last 7 get over the number. No real shocker there. Meanwhile, Rice is 6-1 to the over this year themselves. I'm going to lean toward Rice, -16.5, over 59. Next contest, a little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Rutgers at Minnesota, 2:30 p.m. East. Minnesota's -14, totals 40. And even though the Gophers are coming off a tough loss at Penn State, they've still been able to run the ball effectively for the most part. Mo Ibrahim, he's running for over 100 yards a game. And he scored 10 times already on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, I got to tell you, the Gophers have one of the better defenses in all of college football. Don't let last week's performance against Penn State fool you. These guys are still allowing only 16 points a game, and that figure actually includes that loss to Penn State. Now, they're facing a Rutgers offense who's been little threat throwing the football. These guys are averaging just 165 yards a game through the air. When it comes to the total, 4 out of Rutgers' last 7 stayed under the number. Meanwhile, Minnesota went 3-1 to the under in their last 4. I'm going to lean toward the Minnesota Golden Gophers, -14, under 40. Next matchup, Old Dominion taking on Georgia State, 3 o'clock East. I think this is our next. We're breaking the videos down into part 1 and part 2. More views, more money. I don't know what else to tell you. So I think this is the last game for our part 1 video. But once again, Old Dominion at Georgia State, 3 o'clock East. Georgia State's -3, totals 55. Now, the Georgia State Panthers are one of the better rushing teams in the country. They're in the top 10 in rush yards per game, and they're averaging over 5 yards a carry. Now, they're facing an Old Dominion squad on the other side who has a defense who's had problems slowing anyone down. They rank 116th in total yards allowed. When it comes to the number 2, out of the Monarchs' last 3 did get over the total. Meanwhile, Georgia State went 3-2 to the over in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Georgia State, -3, over 55. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our quick pick recap. I like NC State minus 13.5, under 40 and a hook. Louisiana plus 1.5, under 43. Utah minus 8, under 56. East Carolina plus 4, over 61. Louisiana Tech minus 6.5, over 58. Ohio State minus 15, over 62. TCU minus 7, over 69.5. Syracuse minus 3, under 46. Arkansas minus 3.5, over 61. Oklahoma minus 1, under 55. UConn plus 8.5, under 45. Florida State minus 22, under 48.5. USF plus 17, over 62. Toledo minus 7, over 58. Miami, Ohio minus 9, under 49. Miami, Florida minus 2.5, under 47. Rice minus 16.5, over 59. Minnesota minus 14, under 40. With my next and final free pick for the video, for part 1, I'm going to lean toward Georgia State minus 3, over 55.